JJWalsh in Hiroshima. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Aya Murray. Thank you for much for joining.
Hello.
Yay!
Hi. Hello. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Hi.
So today we're talking about the performing arts. And Aya, you're the first guest that I've had on to talk about this topic. But
Mhm.
you're an educator, you're a performance arts, you're a director, you're an actor. Where did this passion for acting start? Can
Mm.
you think back to a time?
Yes, definitely. I think it was my time as a child in Singapore. One of the great things about Singapore back then was there was nothing. Like it's not the metropolis it is today. Sentosa, which is now like, full of casinos and things like that, was basically a beach and a broken down outdoor skating rink. So I had a lot of free time. So I did a lot of after school activities, and one of them was like a song and dance troupe. But I didn't really think so seriously about that. It was just another fun activity that I was doing. Uh, but I went with one of my best friends to an open cast call for a really major musical on in Singapore with this big theater company, and unfortunately, I got in and she didn't, and it was a bit awkward for a while. But anyway, that experience was just amazing because I got to see all the different parts of what theater is and how much goes on behind the scenes. Everybody gets to see this one aspect of it, but I got to see the back of it. And that was actually the backstage was really exciting for me. And that kind of got me hooked into theater. Yeah.
Wow. Now you grew up in Japan,
Mhm.
very bilingual, bicultural Japanese
Mhm.
and British English, but
Mhm.
also American.
American.
You studied in Australia as well. You really, and I think your work, you're really trying to integrate so many of the different layers of people
Yeah.
that we have here in
Mhm.
Japan in the kind of work that you're producing and directing, right?
Yes, absolutely. I was really, really lucky as a kid to get to, live in these different countries, to have all these multitude of experiences and have this weird hybrid accent as a result, and all this stuff. And I really, when I started TI, I really wanted to celebrate that by engaging with lots of different types of people from a diverse background. It was selfishly in a way because I wanted to keep that continue learning from different people and to keep that kind of international atmosphere in my life. Um, but also, I think, one of the things I think is really important in since we are in Japan is to take advantage of the fact that we're here and to really embrace the local artists and the local artistic approaches. And that's a really big part of why I started TI.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking before we started about how important the arts are in
Mhm.
performing art in terms of sustainability and the kind of society we want to live in, that we're striving for. Can you talk on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things about theater is theater deals in in trying to bring out the truth of humanity, of the beautiful aspects and the not so beautiful aspects of human existence, and kind of brings a mirror up for us to really examine ourselves and to examine situations in a partially subjective, partially objective way. Right. The advantage is that you're watching something that's happening on stage. So you're once removed, but you're going on a journey with the actors, through the story. And I really find that it's a great place. It's a great space for reflection. And so by participating in theater either as an actor or as an observer, as an audience member, it really allows one to really explore themes from multiple perspectives and maybe gain new ideas and new ways of thinking. I mean, that's one thing that we really wanted to showcase here in TI is, we wanted to show people a different way of approaching art and also to examine different themes. Our first piece, Transit, was meant to kind of hold up a mirror to the expat expat community and say, look, these are collections of stories that I've collected over the years, by being a bit of a fly on the wall, listening to different people. And like, this is our culture and this is our life, and getting people to examine what that was. I mean, some people didn't really like what they saw, but I'm like, well, it's based on truth. Nothing that was ever represented in that show was not something that people had said multitude of times and heard people saying over and over again in different ways. So I think that's one thing too. And by, casting a diverse range of people in and reimagining old stories like what we did with Medea, where we set it in Japan, it allowed people to examine, what it's like to be a foreign woman in Japan, for example. And I thought that those kind of opportunities are really important. That local, local Japanese people too could examine and understand what people who are maybe Western women might feel living in Japan, for example. The good, the amazing, and the hardships. Yeah. So in that sense, I think theater can be a good medium for reflection.
Yeah, wonderful. I'd like to go back and talk a
Sure.
little bit more about each of those plays that you mentioned there. But
Yeah.
before we just say why you wanted to start your own theater company in the first place. I heard a great
Yeah.
interview that you did,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
released a few days ago,
Yeah.
by Japan Passion Project. It was a great interview, and you were talking about how it was kind of limiting in terms of the
Mm.
producers, or
Mm.
led by men, or kind of, like you realized there was a perspective there that you had an opportunity to represent. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think, I do know that, like, in the past, and even when I was starting to consider creating TI, there were a lot of great female artists and directors, and people who were um trying to start theater companies and things like that. But I did feel that, yes, primarily like the big theater companies that are international in Nagoya were predominantly run by white men. And that's not again, I don't mean this to be like a disparaging of those companies. That's not the case. It was just that I felt like there could be another perspective. And I felt like also the fact that I was half Japanese and was and very much raised to be like both of both cultures. um I felt that I could bring something interesting to the table, for sure. um yeah, and I think I was just really lucky that I happened to be surrounded by some incredibly talented women who were kind of itching to really get their voices heard and to be represented. And luckily, because of those women, I was able to start this theater company. It is mine, but it wasn't built by me alone. It was built by a really amazing group of incredibly talented women.
That's amazing. Just to shout out to Louise
Mm.
and Cheryl, who are joining from YouTube. Great to see you here. Louise says, hello, she's in our time zone. Fantastic. Great to have you here, Louise. And Cheryl, I've often wondered about cultural distress and how individuals' perspective would change interpersonally and intra and interpersonally. Wow,
Mhm.
great. Thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah, thank you, and hello, Louise.
Fantastic. So I was showing your logo here. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about the name. I love the logo. It's so beautiful.
Oh,
Did you
yes.
design that yourself?
No, no, I did not design that myself. It was designed by a very good friend of mine, again, a wonderful, amazing female artist. And the name Theatre Iridescence, well, iridescence is, of course, light reflecting upon water. It's like the idea of like the rainbow, multicolors. But of course, one other way of reading iridescence in Japanese would be Aya. So it's kind of a play, very subtle play on my name. My name is not actually that kanji. It's a different kanji. But I was like, oh, it's a little, little undercover, little, connection to myself, but primarily the idea was that it would be a reflection of the beautiful diverse cultures in Japan. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And your tagline,
Hmm.
stories
Shining a light
untold.
on untold stories.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's
I
you're
mean,
trying to now some of the plays that you've actually written yourself, do they come from your personal experience or just things you've observed and kind of
mhm.
creatively you thought of? Or where does that come from?
So I've only written one play, and the rest are all adaptations of other plays, um, or a reimagining of a classic play. But Transit was somewhat somewhat based on my life. There's, of course, one pulls from one's own life certain aspects, and I did use a couple of storylines from my own life, but I think that a lot of people thought it really literally was about my life and it was about the way I felt about things. And it wasn't. It was a collection of stories. It was years of research, of talking to different people about their life experiences here. And again, like I said earlier, it's kind of like being a fly on the wall at the bars, at the restaurants, hearing what people were saying. A lot of times, especially when people are drinking, they're not really paying attention to someone sitting in the corner kind of with their ear picked up a little bit. So it was a combination of all of those things. And I think one of the things that I think ultimately felt like I hadn't made clear enough was that it really wasn't about me, and it wasn't really a story about me. It didn't help that I played the main character, of course. There was a couple things that I would definitely do differently. And yeah, the main character being half Japanese, me being half Japanese. But yeah, that one was definitely a collection of different people's stories. With Medea, it was, a traditional Greek play that was just basically reset in Japan, and certain things were changed, like the names of characters was changed, but the essential story was exactly the same. It was just that by setting it in Japan, and by having Medea, which Medea actually in the original Greek tragedy is a foreign woman from a foreign land, but by setting it in Japan and having Jessica, my wonderful friend and wonderful actress, play Medea, it just kind of helped to frame the story from the perspective of Western women living in Japan. And Medea loses her husband to to a local woman, right? So he the husband goes and marries a Japanese princess in the story, the reimagining. And I mean, this is something that does often happen in Japan, and it's and that kind of feeling of the invisibleness of being a Western woman sometimes, I think was a really important theme that I wanted to bring out. When I thought of the story of Medea, I really thought, I think we could tell the story from the perspective of, a lot of how some Western women feel when they come to Japan. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
and one of the things you were saying in the interview was that you
Mhm.
had the dialogue was
Mhm.
really tricky because you wanted the actors to speak in Edo era Japanese.
That is right. That is correct. Yeah. I mean, it was an insane idea. The show itself was just a crazy idea. It was a huge gamble. I didn't think it was gonna necessarily work, but thank goodness we had a really dedicated actress whose Japanese was quite good anyway, and she worked so hard on this show. I really, you know, I can't imagine having to do all that in a foreign language, and especially like period Japanese. But what I really loved about that, as I mentioned in the previous podcast that I did with, um, oh my goodness, Passion Project, um, was the real collaboration, the real helping of each other. They would help each other with their lines. If there were English lines, the English actors would help the Japanese actors with the English lines, with the Japanese lines. There was an amazing actress who was playing the princess who Medea's husband leaves Medea for, but the actresses were working really closely with each other and helping each other out. we had Nishikawa-san, the head of the Iemoto for the House of Nishikawa's School of Dance, come in and teach us movement, and the Japanese actors after that kept helping the Western actors with those movements, and it was just it was a beautiful collaboration. But yes, they had to speak in Edo period Japanese for a lot of the scenes because a lot of the scenes had to be in Japanese. It didn't make sense otherwise, right? Why would an Edo period lord speak in English? It just wouldn't make sense. So
Yeah.
we limited the English only to, as you do in an international, relationship, to when they were in the house together. Just the husband and the wife were in the house together, or ex-husband and wife. Yeah.
Wow. And you have both Japanese and international actors that you're a
Yes.
director role, and you're bilingual. Is pretty
Mhm.
much everybody in your cast, are they functional bilinguals living in Japan?
No,
No.
not necessarily. I mean, it depends on the production, of course. Like this, the most current production we have is actually an English cast only this time. It's been a quite a long hiatus for me, so coming back, I'm keeping things very, very simple for my first show. My next show will be much more ambitious, but yes, not necessarily do people speak the same language? Some people speak no Japanese, some people speak no English. And essentially, for some productions, it was literally myself translating myself back and forth, so I'd be like, "じゃあもう一回やりましょう. Okay, let's do it again." Like that would be just in one breath, or さっきのそのシーンはちょっと、タイミングがちょっと合わなかったので、もう一回やりましょう. Let's do it again because the timing wasn't quite right. And that's literally just in one breath would be what I would do as I was directing bilingual productions.
That's
But I'm
amazing.
but I'm
Yeah.
used to it, I guess. I guess I'm used to it.
That's really cool. Now, with your next production, Speaking in
Mhm,
Tongues, you had a
mhm.
really unique approach. You had entire production in English, entire production in Japanese, and
Yeah,
people would watch in one or the other language. Some of the audience would then stay for the version that they didn't watch.
yeah.
Is that right? That's
That's
amazing.
right. That's right. So we really so when you have a bilingual production, oftentimes you have to use subtitles, and we wanted to avoid using subtitles because we wanted to um, be able to have the audience really just watch the show. And as we were thinking about that, I we ended up thinking, well, why not have two productions? Because it's a really interesting opportunity for people to see how two directors, one Japanese, one Western director, how they would interpret the exact same piece, and how a Japanese cast would interpret it, how a Western cast would interpret it, an international cast would interpret it. And they were so different. The two shows were so different. It was it was amazing in the sense. I remember people coming to me being like, I felt like I watched two completely different shows. And I have to agree. But yeah, by watching it once in the language that you're more comfortable with, I felt like it was a really great opportunity to allow people to see not only two perspectives, but to be able to see both shows without being so focused on looking at subtitles.
I can't even imagine from an organizational perspective how you would do that. And then
Yeah.
it must have been really interesting for the audience, but like logistically and for all the rehearsals, it must have been quite a
Yeah.
organizational task.
It was because in essence we were doing two shows at the exact same time. It wasn't, I think maybe it was me primarily naively thought that, oh, it's just one show. It's not going to be that difficult. I mean, yeah, two casts and two directors. It's not going to be that difficult. And about maybe like a couple weeks in, I was like, wow, I have bitten off way more than I can chew. But I was really lucky. We had a really great production crew that with that production really like amazing people who took on so much in order for that to actually happen. But yes, twice, two directors, two egos, two approaches, two groups of actors with each group having their own drama and things like that. I mean, it was just, yeah, herding kittens is what I often feel like we do as, a production crew, but it was like, double batch of kittens that we had to herd. So that was a that was a challenge, but ultimately it was really rewarding, I think.
Can you talk about you
Mm,
mentioned the process is different for Japanese actors
mhm.
or Western actors or for
Yeah.
non-Japanese actors. Can you talk about that a little bit? How do people usually do acting in Japan versus other places? You talked about like the
Yeah.
inside out, outside in kind of idea.
Yes. Yeah. So, um, this is not only based on my own observation, but what people I've talked to a lot of my Japanese actor friends, and they often talk about the fact that you kata kara hairu, which is uh, kata meaning like your body language, how you move, how your face moves, um, and starting with that, like making sure that you look right for that emotion, or you look right for what's happening in the scene. So it's more about paying attention to how you are perceived by the audience and trying to make it um acceptable in that way. And this is really interesting because I talked to a Japanese choreographer, about Japanese dancers, and I had commented to her, like, I always feel like Japanese dancers don't really emote with their face. And she's like, well, no, we focus on the body. The face is secondary. The emotion in there is secondary. If you cannot focus on creating the emotion for the audience, you know um you feeling it means nothing. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. um and I do think that there is something to be said for that, because I think sometimes, um I have Western actors who are like, I really felt it that time, and I'm like, I didn't see it though. I felt it. I understand that you felt it, but it didn't come across to me, the audience member. And so there is something to be said for paying attention to the kata, of course. But I think from a Western perspective, we start with like text analysis and in-depth character analysis and character motivations, and what does that character want to do in this moment. How are they feeling? What is the history behind this feeling? So we do come from that internal and building a character from within. Um, and so sometimes those two approaches can clash. I remember when I was doing Medea, and I had spoken to a Japanese actor, and had gone on about, like, what is the internal motivation of your character, and he got very frustrated and wanted to have coffee with me afterwards to talk about how this is not how I approach my character. And it was a really great learning experience for me, sitting there, trying to understand where he was coming from and kind of meet him halfway. And I think, ultimately, having being able to have both toolboxes is what would make the perfect actor, in a sense. So I think learning from each other in that sense is a really important one. But yeah, definitely, I learned a lot about the kata kara hairu through my experiences of interacting with Japanese actors. Yeah.
That's so cool. We have a comment from Cheryl. I think this would be fascinating to watch the fusion. Is there an entire show available to watch online? I'm not in Japan. Any chance that people can watch it online?
This show that we're doing now, because of copyright rules, we are not allowed to stream it. We don't have the streaming rights for it. Many years ago, we did do a what is it? We did a crowdfunding, and people who donated to our theater company did get an extra perk of being able to watch the entire filmed version of Transit the Musical, and that I do have the rights to. So Cheryl, let's negotiate. Let's have a little chat at some point. And if you're interested in seeing a past show of ours, that's definitely one. Um, yeah, let's talk maybe after the podcast.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I have put your website link. So,
Great.
is that a good way to get in touch?
Yes, yes. There's a contact us tab in the on the website, so and that goes directly to our website. Sorry, our email. So yeah, please contact me there.
Wonderful. Now,
Yeah.
you are a full-time university educator. You have your
Mhm.
EDD in drama and education.
Mhm.
Congratulations. That was
Thank
one of
you.
the reasons for the gap, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes, getting my
Yeah.
EdD was a really big thing. Yeah.
And you have said you
Mhm.
really feel that drama is a great skill for everybody, for life. Can you talk about
Yes.
that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. For example, for just taking an example from my own life, I was a really shy and very awkward kid, and I'm still a very shy and awkward human being. And acting has taught me how to channel that and move it into a different space so that I can, function as a member of society and interact with people. It can teach you how to be a better listener, better communicator. It's great for job interviews, and just being more present with other people. I think it really teaches you a lot about that. But yeah, I mean, if you're someone who's very nervous and anxious and wants to learn how to present oneself and overcome those nerves, acting is a really great way to do it.
That's awesome. Now it
Yeah.
looks like you've done some talks and lectures for other people as well. I found
Ah,
this one.
yes. Yes,
A
that's right.
demo? What's happening? Where's that?
That's at the Aichi Art Center, which is this beautiful theater. And this is just this was a Q&A session. A couple Zemis actually came to our shows, and then they participated in a Q&A afterwards. But I also have done a lot of workshops, drama and education workshops at various institutions, including recently one in Hiroshima for Jogaku the high school. I did a drama workshop with them. I think it was a 3-hour workshop. They were really great. It was great. It was all about experiencing what it's like to be an immigrant. Yeah, taking them through the journey of being an immigrant, leaving one's home. But yeah,
Being
so there's a
able, yeah, being able to think about
Mhm.
stepping into somebody else's shoes, having
Yeah.
empathy is
Yes,
really a great way to
exactly.
do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So drama and education approaches are like that's one of the like a lot of research says that, it's a really an amazing way for people to gain empathy, to gain better critical thinking skills and looking at things from multiple perspectives. And it's one of the reasons why I love doing drama and education like workshops and interacting with different people. And I teach drama at my own school and also use drama and education approaches there. Particularly, I'm my area of expertise is process drama, which is experiential drama. It's not drama for performing for other people, and I'm really really into that on the education side of things.
That's awesome. Now, I asked you before we started if you would
Yes.
mind giving us a little example of an
Yeah.
exercise you might do with students or with your actors. Is that
Sure.
okay?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Okay. So just everyone, just to note, I have a camera here and I have a screen here. So I'm looking back and forth between two. So I'm going to probably try to look at Joy right here. I'm going to look at you in the screen. Okay. So this is a technique called the repetition activity. This is a Meisner approach. And the goal of this is to really listen and be in tune with the other person. A lot of people think that acting is a very like selfish act, but it's actually it really needs to be a very giving act and just being really incredibly present with your partner. So um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by noticing something that you're wearing or something in the background, and I'm going to say a sentence. What I would like you to do is listen to how I say it and repeat it as closely to the way I say it as possible. And then after you repeat it, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to try to repeat it as closely as I can to exactly how you said it. Um, And whatever it is, the rule is whatever way the other person says it, you have to try to match it as closely as possible. Okay? Okay. So let's see. Your shirt is burgundy.
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 I think we get the idea.
Right.
Wow.
So,
How long do you go for?
oh, just a couple times, and then we build on that, and we do different exercises. But this is the foundation, and it's really hard to do when we're on a computer. It's
Yeah.
much easier for it in real time. But it's just I just did that with my drama kids this week too. Sorry, I called them my students' kids, and it really does get them to pay attention. I've done this with my actors, and yeah, it's just an exercise about being really observant and attentive to the other person.
That's so cool. Thank you so much for doing that. I
No
appreciate it.
worries.
So it's a great transition into talking about Betrayal, which is your
Yeah,
big production this year. You only do one production every year.
that's
You've
right.
had a little bit of a hiatus. Tell
Mhm.
us about Betrayal.
Okay. Betrayal. Oh, it is a piece by Harold Pinter. He is a like a Nobel laureate of literature. He is an incredible playwright. He is possibly one of the greatest playwrights to ever come out of the UK. It's set in the late 1960s to the late 1970s. It spans about 9 years of time, and it's all about these two best friends and one of the men's wife. So there's Robert, Jerry, and Emma. Robert and Emma are married. Robert and Jerry are best friends. Jerry and Emma have a 7-year affair. Um, and it's all about connection, craving connection, but feeling disconnected from people, that kind of loneliness that one can feel when you're in a relationship that you where you don't really feel truly connected. It's about two men who are, living through a time where they can't really be honest with each other about how much they love each other, really. And it's just, yeah, it's all about the things that are unsaid that kind of pull people apart. And the story interestingly starts at the end. Um, and then it ends at the beginning of the relationship. And we just go back in time, with each scene, kind of. And the audience kind of gets to play detective and try to sort out what happened between these three people, you know. And there's no big secret. I mean, the fact that they have an affair is mentioned in the first minute, really, of the show. So there's no, oh my God, they had an affair. Like, we already know. And it's just kind of like, when did this happen? How did it happen? What made these relationships fall apart? Um, and it stars three really amazing actors, all really experienced and very, very talented. We've got Cameron, who plays Robert. He's just perfect for that role. And he's quite the sort of as is the role, the intellectual heart of our production. Um, we've got Jerry, played by Richie, lovely Aussie guy, down to earth, really hardworking, really dedicated, who's acting. He's been acting for, I think, over 10 years, and all of it locally here in Nagoya. So he is a Nagoya trained, Nagoya raised actor. And then we have the amazing Rachel as Emma. She went to university for drama. She's incredibly talented, and she brings so much, not only as herself acting, but she brings so much to the production in terms of her wealth of knowledge and her support of the other actors. She's such a giving actor. I just love working with her because she's so, so giving. Yeah. But yeah, it's basically three really great experienced actors putting on a production that is like at the act. It's an actor's show. It's very challenging because you know Pinter doesn't give us the whole story, and we have to kind of fill in the gaps ourselves. So um, a lot of our rehearsal has been about creating the world of the story and creating the minute details of the relationship between the three that helps to flesh it out and make these three characters real living, three-dimensional people. Yeah.
It's so interesting. And that on your Instagram, you have some great interviews with the three main actors and
Yeah,
yourself, which is great.
a little bit. Yes.
And one of the things your actors say is that you're helping like bring out so much of the subtext, that there's
Mhm.
so much they have to act because it's not said, it's
Yeah.
inferred. That must
Yeah.
be extra tricky, right?
Sure. I think, we have to create, so that's why we have to create a really concrete a world and life experience for these characters, because yes could be no, it could be I'm angry at you, it could be anything. So we have to have made a choice, as not only each individual actor has to make the choice, but we also have to make the choices together and make sure that the narrative of these different characters' lives mesh well with each other. But yeah, I mean, subtext is something that I think a lot of American audiences don't necessarily enjoy. One thing about Pinter is that Pinter hasn't always done very well in America, because some people get frustrated and be like, just say what you're thinking. But for Japanese audience, I feel like they will get it. They will get it no problem, because Japanese culture is also about all the things that are unsaid. Japanese and British culture is actually, in this regard, very similar. A lot of kuki o yammanai to ikenai, like you have to read so kuki o yama, read between the lines. You have to kind of grasp that. So that's a big part of another big part of why I thought it'd be interesting to do Pinter in Japan, because I just think Japanese audiences will really get it. Will really get what they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could imagine. The
Mm.
hone tatemae, the
Yes.
public face, and the
So.
real feeling. I imagine
Yeah.
there's some of that in there.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is exactly. I mean, you know, uh, Cameron and I were actually talking about that the other day. We're like, we're so similar, like British culture, Japanese culture, so similar. And I remember Rachel sending me a text being like, why can't these characters just say what they're thinking? And I love that. I love that. So yeah, yeah, it'll be,
Yeah.
I think, really easily understood by Japanese audiences.
Wow, great. It's something we need to dive into more, right? How to better
Mhm.
understand each other,
Yeah,
whether that's reading the room, like you
yeah,
say, or listening better,
yeah,
right? Or speaking
yeah,
more clearly. These are all the advantages of the
yeah,
creative performing arts, but also the training of it too, right?
yeah, absolutely. Sure. Um, my students here at school, after they do a big production, they're like, I finally feel like I know how to use my voice, and I know how to talk to people, and I know how to express my emotions. And I think that's uh, you know that can't, how do I say that? Like, これ以上嬉しいことがない. Like I can't be more pleased to hear when they say something like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listening to Rachel when she was talking on your Instagram about
Yeah.
why she became an actor.
Mhm.
She said she was interested in everything. So
Yeah.
acting was a good fit. And I thought maybe that's similar for a lot of actors. Be able to take on another personality. It's like travel
Yeah.
on the stage, that kind of thing. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about acting is not only do you get to show parts of yourself that you already have, but to explore parts of yourself that you didn't even know were there. And in a sense, that isn't that what we do sometimes when we travel, is to kind of, by going to a new country, discover something new about ourselves ultimately. And I think that's a big part of it too. But also, honestly, every person in theater has to have like a million different drawers of abilities. Um, I can't tell you how many new skills I've had to learn through, doing productions. And I think she's similar, right? Every time she does a new show, she's got to learn something new. And I think that kind of curiosity is something that is common amongst theater folk, both on and behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then something that Richie was saying, he has
Mm.
so much trust for you, having worked with you before, and you were helping
Yeah.
him see and experience the deeper subtext of the role, which he's learning a lot. So that's really
Yeah.
exciting and
That is
wonderful
really
to hear
nice.
when your actors trust you. That must
Yeah.
be something you work on quite a lot as a director, right?
Yes, I mean, the the director in some ways is, the conductor of the orchestra, is the navigator of the ship. If you don't trust that person, you cannot really um, give yourself to that production in many ways. And so I hope to earn, and I always strive to earn the trust of my actors. And I think, I mean, I've known Richie for so long, and we've shared the stage together so many times, and we've been through some really traumatic performances together. So I mean, we have that bond already as actors, fellow actors. But it did really make me blush and want to cower and hide, but also made me really happy and a little teary to know that he trusts me, because that means a lot. And I Yeah, that's all you can ask for, is to be able to earn their trust and have the opportunity to do so.
I
Yeah.
think that's amazing, and it's really important as a
Yeah.
woman director in Japan,
Yeah.
where we have so much gender gap still
Yeah.
after so many years, that to be respected for what you do and what you do well,
Yeah.
whether you're a man or woman or
Yeah.
non-binary, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, of course it's a challenge. I've had actors be very adversarial towards me, and that's been really difficult. I've had, not really my production crew, because I'm always really lucky with that. But even when I'm going out and promoting shows, or talking to other people, sometimes not so interested in uh in what I have to say, or what we are trying to do. It's a little bit of, sometimes, not often, but sometimes, that kind of negative thing does happen. But generally speaking, I think I've been really, really lucky, that I've been able to um have the people around me that I know will not consider my gender, or the gender, or the identity of the other person, um let that be prejudicial in any way. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that overall we've always had pretty, uh at least in TI, we've had really a good group of people who've never really been that disparaging. I mean, I think primarily it's mostly cultural more than gender based that we've had any clashes, and those clashes just are par for the course of working with people from different backgrounds. And what we just do is we sit down and we talk about it, and usually it just solves itself in that way. Yeah, I've been
Wow.
pretty lucky.
Yeah. No, it's
Mm.
amazing. And then Cameron was saying, for him, it was a real
Mhm.
challenge,
Mhm.
going back to the ideas of gender, men and women of the
Yeah.
1970s, where the play is set. So that has so many parallels, and
Mhm.
hopefully some feelings of accomplishment, that we have moved on in some ways, but
Yeah.
other ways we haven't, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, bless Cameron. He's just such a lovely human being. And, some of the things that these men say, some of the things they do in this show, I mean, I know he couldn't imagine doing them. But what I thought was very interesting about this piece is, it's set in the late 60s to mid 70s. And it's kind of when women were, starting to um, gain equality. And, within that, there was a lot of friction, right? A lot of men in that time were not entirely pleased that women wanted to be on equal footing, wanted to get the jobs and, be working and not be cooking and taking care of the kids at home. And that is actually a theme, that I think modern Japan now is still grappling with. I listening to attitudes on the street, listening to people talking, again, being a fly on the wall, listening to people talking. It's still very much an issue in Japan today. And so I think that there are parallels that people can kind of connect to, even though it is set in the late 1960s.
Yeah. There's
Um,
so many things from the past that we
mhm.
can learn from, right?
Yeah,
The main
yeah,
thing is not to completely erase the past,
yeah,
to keep moving forward and be
yeah.
honest about our flaws and
Mhm.
not repeat our mistakes, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think, I think that we can like, it's kind of like Mad Men, like, you can look at it and be shocked by it, but then go out in the street and be like, "Oh, well, I mean, it's different, but it's not that different." That kind of connection, yeah, I think is definitely important. And yeah, there's a lot of like ignoring of women sometimes, or ignoring of women's feelings that still does happen. And that's a really big theme of the show. We in the cast have a hashtag that's called hashtag justice for Judy. And the reason why the hashtag is there is because um Jerry, played by Richie, he has a wife named Judy, but she never shows up in the show at all. And she's also literally mentioned, like, all the time. People are asking him, like, how's Judy? And he's like, she's fine, she's great, good. We don't know anything about her. By the end of the show, we still know nothing about Judy. And so, yeah, that kind of like erasure of a person's identity also, I think, is a theme that we can still relate to today. Yeah.
Absolutely. How many of us feel like we're invisible sometimes? And
Yeah.
then how many stories do you hear about people who go through life feeling that way, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely very relevant. Now you wear many hats. You are not only the director, you're often the actor and the writer, but you're also the business owner of the theater company. Tell us a
Mm,
little bit about some of the challenges, but also
mm.
learning that process. Was it hard to get to know how to do that?
Yes, yes. I mean, TI is its own, thing, of course, in the sense that it's how do I say? Like, I try to keep that as a separate entity from my own other aspects of life. But yes, learning how to budget, learning how to sell tickets, learning how to promote. Like I said, I'm actually a very socially awkward person, and so the first time I had to produce a show and I had to go to like dinners and talk to people I don't know, and and try to be like, please come and see my show, and you want to financially support us because we're amazing, um inwardly just cringing and just wanting to yeah, just to go into my little like rabbit hole. I remember like there's so many nights after going to some event and being like all chatty, chatty, chatty. I get in the elevator and just be like, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this, and having a panic attack afterwards. So that aspect is really challenging, was challenging for me. And like talking about myself and talking up TI was, it's just not something that I'm really comfortable with. Um, but yeah, the finances, like knowing what things are going to cost. Um, the first time I did a show, it was a very soft open. We didn't actually call it a TI show, but I did a show called Snow Angel, and it was like a one act play that I did with another theater company that did another one act. We were doing a combination. And I mean, I just had no idea how much things were going to cost me. And that was not a financially successful show because I didn't know how much things cost. I didn't know how to budget. I didn't know how to say no, you know. But I've learned, and now I know, how much percentage of my budget I can spend on this one, X, Y, and Z. And yeah, I'm slowly learning how to say no to certain things for
Yeah.
sure.
You mentioned about the budgeting and the cost of the theater. There's a lot of
Mhm.
costs involved. One of the ways you could save money is getting all your actors to sell tickets, which is kind of a
Mhm.
Part of Japanese culture. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, so back in Hiroshima, when I was part of my opera, I was really surprised that when I went for my first rehearsal, they gave me a packet of tickets and they said, "This is your ticket norma." And I was like, "What is a norma?" I was like, because Norma is actually a famous opera. So I was like, "Wait, I'm in a different show. This is not the right show." And they were like, "No, no, no. Norma means like you have to sell this many tickets." And I'm like, "But each ticket, it's like each my yen." And they're like, "Yep, you gotta sell them. Gotta sell them." I was like, "So what happens if I don't sell them?" "Well, then you'll pay for them yourself." Like, I have to pay to perform? That had never happened to me before. So yeah, that was my introduction into Japanese arts. And I mean, yeah, I mean that's how these big opera companies, for example. So I can't necessarily speak for all theater, but the Japanese opera company, this was normal practice. All of my like actor dancer friends were like, "I have to sell this many tickets, so please buy a ticket from me." So that was interesting. um when I came to Nagoya and started interacting with Japanese theater companies, some of my actor friends told me that they don't have to necessarily like pay if they didn't sell the tickets, but it would make it difficult for them to get hired again. So their ability to sell tickets was a big reason why they would be hired. And I think I mentioned in previous podcasts that like one of the actors I once worked with, he was like, "So how many tickets do I need to sell?" Like, you do not necessarily have to sell a set number of tickets, but the more you can sell, the better, obviously, for us. Please sell tickets, but there is no requirement that you have to sell XYZ number of tickets. Um, so yeah, and with TI, we generally try to go with a encouraging system as opposed to a like a muchi otataku system. It's more of like a honey system, which is whoever sells the most tickets gets like a special present from me. That's about it. And and mostly I'm like, "Please sell tickets," and I try to work my butt off so that my actors don't have to worry too much about that. Um,
Yeah, because
yeah.
they're doing it for free, right? Is it? You're not paying your actors, are you?
Um.
Or they
Well,
do get compensated?
uh, this depends on certain things, but I do generally try in some way to compensate my actors,
Very nice.
whether it's like a percentage or if we didn't do so well in the box office, then a small ore is usually what I try to do.
Oh, that's really
Um,
nice. Because what you were mentioning about the pressure to sell tickets, that's not just
mhm.
theater. I've heard a lot of
Yeah,
musicians say the
yeah,
same
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
to
yeah,
cover the cost of the venue, right? Usually.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's it's just because Japan's so if you're like Gekidan Shiki or you're like Shiata Obu in Tokyo and you're like a major big name, so if you're like basically like Broadway class theater company, then your actors don't have to worry about selling tickets. The tickets are going to sell themselves. But yeah, I mean, the cost of putting on a show is incredibly high in Japan versus the risk of not making that return is very high in Japan compared to other places because Japanese people are not naturally theater goers, especially of Western theater. And you're adding an extra hurdle where you're when you're like, it's in English. with subtitles. I mean, even our bilingual productions, I've had like both international and like Japanese people be like, I don't know if I want to read subtitles, and I respect that. It's like watching a foreign film. It's not for everyone, and so I get that. So yeah, I mean that's a big challenge in terms of trying to get ticket sales. So for my actors, every production I've done something different. For this production, the actors now know that they'll be getting a special gift. But that was actually something I wasn't going to tell them just yet because I wanted it to be a surprise. But yeah, they'll be getting something, a little thank you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you're one of only a few people that I've talked to
Mhm.
from Nagoya. Tell us what
Yes.
is great about Nagoya. Give us a little pitch.
Okay. Nagoya is in the center of Japan, and that is just amazing for so many things. We are so close to everywhere, like it's a 40-minute train ride to Kyoto. It's an hour to Osaka. It's 90 minutes to Tokyo. It's great. In terms of convenience to lots of other different places. And within Aichi, I mean, Aichi is just such a beautiful place. You take a 2-hour car ride and you're at this beautiful, like surfing coast. The water's gorgeous, there is a lot of beautiful nature. We're very close to Gifu, so you can drive up and enjoy the beautiful rivers, and the onsens in Gifu also. So again, central location. It's a very green city. There's a lot of parks. I have a dog, and we visit different parks within the month, and it's just gorgeous that way. It makes me think of England in that sense. There's a lot of arts here. So for me personally, I love being here because it has a really vibrant arts community. Not only like visual arts, but also performing arts, really, really yutaka. Like I said before, a good friend of mine is the Iemoto of the Nishikawa Ryu School of Dance. And there's just so much traditional art here as well. So that, yeah, I think it's a very rich culture, and it just gets looked over a lot. The history of Nagoya is incredible. Like if you like Japanese history, then you must come to Nagoya. It's the center of many, many major points in Japanese history. But yeah, I don't know why we get looked over. It's a great place to live. I came here by accident, and now it's my home. Yeah, I love it.
That's fantastic. Before we started, you also mentioned that you have a
Mm.
deep love of Hiroshima, which was lovely to
Yes,
hear. That you have a
yes.
family connection, right?
Yes, my grandfather. So my grandfather is a hibakusho, and he set up a clinic, a medical clinic in Hiroshima. And I was actually born just down the street from my grandfather's clinic, and so I spent every summer in Hiroshima, and I lived in Hiroshima for I think about 9 years. Met a lot of really amazing people, and yeah, I mean it's really my hometown. So I love it. Actually, Transit, my musical was set in Hiroshima. So a lot of the
That's amazing.
foreigner hangout spots like the Shack, Molly Malone's, all those places are actually featured in Transit as a little ode to my time there. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, we'll have to get together when you come back,
Yes.
and I am coming to your show.
Thank
Give
you.
us a little run through. Tell us dates and
Okay.
times and how people can buy tickets.
Okay. Tickets are on sale on our website. You can go to our website and then click where it says tickets. And if it's an online ticketing system, but if you and it's in Japanese, but if you scroll down on the tickets tab, there is a step-by-step English explanation, and it's really simple. It's just basically like put your name in and things like that. Um, the show is June 7, 8, and 9. June 7th, the show is at 7. June 8th, Saturday, is a 1 o'clock and 6 o'clock. And then June 9th is a 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock. So in total, we have 5 shows. And it is in Osu, which is a great part of Nagoya. If you are coming and you want to spend the day and go somewhere kind of unique, It's like an international like Shimokitazawa meets Akihabara kind of place. It's a really funky place. Lots of great restaurants, amazing pizzeria there too. Great Mexican, some great Vietnamese food, like really great international food there. And our theater is Nanatsudera Kyodo Studio, which used to be an old Ningyo Geki theater, like an old Japanese puppet theater. And yeah, tickets are 2,500 yen, which I think is quite otegoro, like not too expensive. Yeah, so please come.
That's awesome. And the 2,500 yen, that's the advanced sales.
Yes,
So on the door is going to be 3,000, right?
yes, yes. Yeah.
So buy it
So
advance, folks.
exactly, exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much for helping
Yes,
with
of
the
course, of
pitch.
course. I'm gonna be there.
Thank
I'm
you. Thank you.
blocking
I'm
off
looking
my
forward to it.
weekend. I'm gonna go explore Nagoya. So I
Oh,
haven't
that's
been there for a
great.
while.
Fantastic. Well, I'll be sending you like my recommendations list and we'll have to have a glass of wine afterwards.
That sounds amazing. Well, good
Thank you
luck.
so
You
much.
said you're only on
Thank you.
about 4 hours sleep a night. So best of
At the
luck.
moment.
Hope it all goes well. And I will see you in Nagoya. Everybody,
Yes,
please join us.
thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thanks everyone for joining and see you there.